Hello, I'm Mrs. J, and welcome to my math class. Today we're continuing on with Chapter 13, the contingency tables, and looking at the goodness of fit, because this is used a lot in different tests. And one way of looking at it and helping explain what the different sections are is one of the tests for cancer. And you want to look at, there's called true positive, true negative, false positive, and false negative. If you have cancer and the tests say you have it, that would mean you have it and it's tested positive. That's called a true positive, because it tested positive and it was right. But if you don't have cancer and the test says you don't, that would be here. You don't have it and the test was negative. That is a true negative because it tested negative and it was right. So this is what you tested, positive or negative, and this is if it's right. So then the next one, test says you do have it, but you don't. So you tested positive, but it was wrong. So that's false positive. So positive is your test. And true or false is if that test is correct. So you tested positive. This one it was correct, this one it was not. Then likewise, the test says you don't have it, but you do would be here. And so you're testing negative, and it's wrong, which makes it false. So when you're finding true positive rates, true negative rates, so how accurate this is for people who do have it, or how much is wrong, you want to think of these in these tables when we use them. Okay. So for a test, we'll try this test for diagnosing depression. It's showing whether the person is depressed or not, and then this way is the test. So our true positive is 31, because they're depressed and the test said they were. So going down is the total that are depressed. Going across would be the total it said were depressed. Let's try a couple probabilities. The first one, if a person is depressed, so depressed is here, what's the probability he is diagnosed correctly? Well, that's also called the true positive rate, because that's this one. And as long as you always make your test go horizontal, you always take this over the bottom number. So that always helps. Make your test always go horizontal. So it's 31 out of the 81. Which is 38%. So our true positive rate is 38%. So those who are depressed, 38% of them will be diagnosed correctly. If a person is depressed, number 2, and the probability says they're not depressed, so they are depressed but it says they're not, that is a false negative rate. And so that would be the 50 out of 81. Because remember, when you're finding the rates, as long as your test goes across, you use the numbers on the bottom. But we also know the person's depressed because it said they were depressed. So it would be 50 out of 81. Which is 62%. So our false negative rate is 62%. That means that 62% of the people who need our help aren't going to get it if they just use this test. On number 3, the test says it's depressed given the person is not depressed. So the test says yes, given it's not depressed. That's a false positive because you tested positive even though you're not depressed. And so that would be, because we're depressed, 34 out of the 291. which is 12%. And that's one thing we want to look at when we're seeing if the test is good enough. Well, one thing we're concerned with is if somebody is not depressed and the test tells them they are, that wouldn't be good. But it's only 12% of the time, so it doesn't sound too bad. But then when you look at the true positive rate, the people who are depressed, only 38% of them are getting the help they need. So they probably need another test. Maybe this is a quick test, and so then these 38% can get help right away, and then the others go into more tests just to make sure. But if this is the only test they're using, it's not good enough, because there's a lot more people, 62% of them, that need help and aren't getting it. So this tells you those who are depressed, and the test says they're not, so they're not getting the help they need. And so you would just look at these values and explain. And that is it for chapter 13. Thank you. Stop. Cut it.